Late one evening, a group of onlookers halted when they heard a small, mournful whimper beneath an old stone bridge. The noise, but what they found beneath the shadows was much more than they could have ever dreamed. A tale of survival bravery, and a secret that would alter the tone of everything. Was first so weak that it could not be heard above the roar of the neighboring creek. It was late at night, and the air beneath the old stone. Emma and her younger brother, Lucas, were walking home from their volunteer work at the local shelter. They stopped dead in their tracks, and a pathetic, quiet wail reverberated throughout They were stopped in their stride by a sound so roaring and depressing that night. "Did you hear that?" Lucas questioned his. Emma nodded while clutching the flashlight she always kept in her bag, as the siblings' voice faltered a little. Looked at each other, feeling the same anxious want to explore, and gingerly made their way to the bridge. The crunching of shoes on the gravel path increased in volume as they approached. More urgently, Emma pointed the flashlight beneath the bridge, and at first, the beam was cutting through the darkness. There was garbage all over the place, and shadows were dancing on the stone walls, when the light caught a little figure moving. There was a dog hiding in the corner, but it wasn't just any dog. It was covered. Its lean body suggested weeks without food, and its matted and tangled fur and dirt. Appropriate nourishment. It trembled fiercely and attempted to push deeper into the stone wall in an attempt to vanish. But Emma and Lucas were particularly taken aback by its huge, scared eyes, which were filled with a unusual intellect that appeared to be begging for assistance. "Hey buddy," Emma murmured quietly while crouching to prevent shocking the animal. Lucas held his breath while observing his sister's abrupt approach. Emma redirected the beam when the dog's eyes moved to something behind it, and she gasped at what she saw. 3 small pups were tucked up in a rudimentary wood and leaf burrow, with their small bodies cuddled up against one another for warmth and their eyes hardly open. The dog wasn't simply a stray. It was a mother, and she was using all of her remaining might to protect her babies. "Lucas, this is more than simply a rescue. This is a family," he said in a hushed tone, and Emma agreed. Moving the animals would be difficult, especially with the racing, but they couldn't leave them here in this condition. Emma and her watchful mother were looking at them with fatigue, and the challenge wasn't simply how to help, but also how to earn their trust. Every time Emma moved closer to the dog, the mother's protective instincts were evident, and Lucas realized they needed a plan. Her ribs were exposed by the flashlight beam as she snarled low in her throat and coiled closer to her puppies. Her weariness is clearly visible in the droop of her ears and the weight of her motions, which stand out strongly. "We can't just," Elsie murmured, kneeling next to Emma. "Grab them. She wouldn't let us. We must calm down." Emma nodded as she dug through her bag, which she usually kept filled with dog goodies from the shelter in case she came across. Strays took out a handful and carefully reached out to the mother, being cautious not to look her in the eye. "Hey girl," she whispered. "It's okay. We're not here to hurt you." Her body towel was initially tense as the dog's growl intensified, but as soon as she smelled the food, her growl changed. She whined softly and tentatively smelled the air, her eyes darting between Emma and Lucas, as if she were intrigued. Holding his breath, Lucas muttered, "Keep going, Emma." Emma edged closer, her hand steady. The dog hesitated despite the thrill pumping through her blood, her eyes darting to her pups as though weighing the. At last, taking a hesitant step, she extended her neck forward and took. She slowly devoured the treat from Emma's palm, her teary eyes never leaving hers. Emma remarked softly, "That's it, girl. You're doing great. We're here to help." The progress was encouraging. Lucas followed in, setting an old t-shirt and a water bottle on the ground. He filled the cap with water and slid it toward the dog, who cautiously sniffed it before licking it up. It was a heartbreaking sight, and she was so. As the minutes passed and the strain in the air started to build, she appeared to be so dehydrated that she could hardly stop sipping. The dog's snarl died down and was replaced by a silent, attentive hush as Emma ate, offered a second treat, bringing it closer to her this time. As the dog moved forward to accept it, she saw something. Oddly, her poor pads were ragged and bleeding, as if she had spent days traversing difficult terrain. Emma said, "Even though she's been through so much in the past few weeks, we need." Lucas nodded, his face serious, trying to urge her to leave, but she's not. Emma leaned back on her heels as she said, I don't think she trusts us enough to let us carry them. Thinking, then it occurred to her that we should establish a secure area where she feels that her puppies will be safe, and if she notices that we're assisting, she might follow. Lucas nodded and took off his jacket, started setting it up in a makeshift bed as Emma meticulously placed additional rewards in a path that led to the jacket. The mother dog kept a close eye on them while they worked in silence, their actions purposeful and non-threatening. When everything was ready, Lucas bent down and said, It's all right. Her body was still wrapped protectively around her puppies. Emma reached up to her now, holding a goodie in her hand for the final time. Pointing to the jacket, she said quietly, Come on, girl. It's safe for you and your infants in sleep. The dog paused, her gaze darting between Emma Lucas and, as she took one hesitant stride, the air felt heavy with anticipation for her babies. Forward, then another, her tail flickering unsurely as she smelled the clothing. Finally, as though deciding what to do, she turned back to her pups and gave them a little nose push. Lucas's eyes expanded as she moved each puppy individually. The mother gently took her pups in her jaws and transported them to the. Emma and Lucas held their makeshift bed every time she came back for another puppy. She was terrified that any abrupt action would betray her fragile trust, yet it was evident that she was taking the opportunity they were providing. And after all three puppies had nestled onto the jacket, the mother lay down next to them, protecting them like a stronghold. Her cautious gaze met Emma's, but this time there was just a silent, weary acceptance rather than a roar. We succeeded, Lucas said, a smile spreading across his lips. Now, all we need to do is transport them to the refuge, Emma agreed, but her heart was heavy. We need a car or a box or something. We can't take them all the way back like this. Lucas took out his phone to protect them on the journey, his fingers fumbling as he dialed the number 4. When Megan, their shelter supervisor, responded, Lucas promptly described the circumstance. We discovered a mother and her puppies in poor condition beneath the bridge. Please keep them calm and come with the van, Megan. I'm on my way, and I will arrive in 10 minutes. While they waited, Emma and Lucas sat beside the mother dog and spoke softly to her. Emma experienced a surge of energy as the puppies wriggled and squeaked their small bodies against their mother's warmth. The slight buzz of an engine was a step toward safety, even though they hoped this was only the start of their journey. Shattered the quiet, and Emma felt a wave of relief as she watched the shelter van arrive on the road above the bridge. To fetch them home, Megan went outside with a big padded crate. She responded in a forceful but gentle tone that she and the mother dog will be all right. Emma sat in the back of the van with the puppies once they were finally safely inside, sleeping in a soft kennel lined with blankets. Observing closely as Megan made her way back to the shelter down the meandering route, the mood in the van was. Emma was both relieved and uncertain, and she couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was still missing. From the front seat, Lucas remarked, Calm down now. Do you think she knows we're helping Emma? And nodded, caressing Emma. I believe the mother dog looks through the crate, but take a look at her paws. Megan has been running for her life, so whatever she's been through isn't just starvation or dehydration. She's always the. A voice of common sense intervened. For the time being, let's concentrate on getting them situated and have the veterinarian examine her first thing. A number of volunteers gathered as the van drew into the shelter's driveway, their expressions displaying a mixture of interest and. Drew mutters in concern as he watches the skinny mother dog carefully emerge from the box with her puppies. Of compassion, let's take them to the examination room, Megan remarked, assuming leadership. The mother dog was hesitant to move the container into the well-lit room as Emma and Lucas cautiously carried it inside. Emma knelt down and gave her a treat as she left the shelter of her crate. Don't worry, darling, you're secure now. Paused, her ears twitching uneasily, but finally went outside with her pups following closely behind her. The veterinarian, Dr. Harper, knelt close by and spoke calmly as she got ready to evaluate the mother. Lucas inquired about her condition. Dr. Harper's voice was tight with concern as she carefully examined the dog's physique to check for any serious injuries. Emma is undernourished, dehydrated, and her paws are in poor condition, but that's not all. "What do you mean?" by the veterinarian, delicately lifting the dog's ear to reveal a barely perceptible tattoo. My gut constricted. Breeders utilize this registration symbol beneath the filth, but not the real ones. Therefore, this poor girl is probably Emma, a puppy mill survivor. Felt her heart sink as the room went silent. The harsh circumstances, overcrowded cages, lack of medical attention, and relentless breeding that characterized mills were well known. Megan bitterly explained that her condition was caused by a dog that was shattered in both body and spirit. But how did she wind up under a bridge? Dr. Harper nodded, suggesting that she might have escaped or was left behind. Lucas clenched his fists at people like that when she was unable to birth litters anymore. She had been through hell. They treat animals like machines, thus they shouldn't be permitted to own them. Emma examined the mother dog, who was now, despite all she had done to keep her infant safe, she licked one of her puppies with unexpected compassion. "We'll take care of her," Emma responded firmly. Yet her perseverance was both heartbreaking and inspiring at the same time. "Opportunity to recover," Dr. Harper said with a gentle smile. "She's in good hands. Let's clean her now. Test the pups. They appear healthy, but it's preferable to be sure." Emma and Lucas remained nearby while the veterinary team worked, giving the mother dog, who is now named. With each second that went by, Rosie's confidence in others grew. Her puppies were deemed healthy, and when they investigated their new environment, their little tails wagged. But Dr. Harper called Emma and Megan aside as the team completed their evaluation. Megan remarked, her brow furrowing, "Is there anything else you need to know?" Rosie's body displayed symptoms of. Dr. Harper warned that her condition is critical if we don't address the acute overbreeding. Emma's chest stiffened. "Therefore, we need to act quickly to prevent her from not recovering." The veterinarian responded, "She needs intensive care, proper nutrition, rest, and possibly surgery." But there is optimism that dogs are extraordinarily strong, particularly when they feel loved and safe. Emma looked back at Rosie, who was now curled up. With her eyes partly closed, she is protective of her babies. Will do whatever it takes. Later that night, as the moon hung low, Emma and Lucas sat outside the shelter with the day's burden bearing down on them. "She's been through a lot," Lucas added, "and the light in the sky is creating long shadows across the peaceful parking lot." Emma broke the silence, and yet managed to take care of her puppies. Her voice was full of emotion as she nodded. Lucas gazed at her, his face softening, as if she never lost up hope despite the world's terrible treatment of her. "Perhaps that's why we're here, to help her see that people are different." Emma grinned slightly, her resolve. Rosie's condition had somewhat improved by the following morning, but we won't let her down. Improved? She was sleeping in the peaceful recovery room of the shelter with her pups cuddling up to her. The group of her container had been replaced after volunteers toiled through the night to make sure she was secure and at ease. Emma arrived early and was given a comfortable bed in a room full of toys and blankets to help her relax. With coffee in hand and resolve in her heart, she entered Rosie's room. When she heard the dog raise her head at the door, her lips curled into a smile. "Good morning, Emma, my dear." Rosie sniffed warily as she knelt down and held out her hand. It was a modest move before she put her chin on Emma's palm, but to Emma, it seemed like a breakthrough. "Hey, Emma." Megan was in the office when Lucas called from the hallway, interrupting her to say that she needed to speak with Emma. After giving Rosie one last pat, she went to the office, where Megan was sitting at her desk. Emma inquired, sitting across from her Megan's side. "What's up?" with a serious expression as she sifted through a stack of papers. "I've been stroking her temples and looking into Rosie's ears registration mark, which is connected to a known puppy. Most of the dogs were saved from a mill that was raided a few months ago, but obviously some didn't make it into the system." Lucas crossed his arms and leaned against the doorframe, causing her to slip, just as Megan stated through the gaps. "And the worst part is that there's no documentation." Emma's jaw tensed. "And if there are no signs of her or her pups anywhere, then it's up to us. We can't." Disappointing her, Megan nodded. "I've already gotten in touch with a nearby charity that focuses on rescuing pets from. They are willing to assist in such circumstances, but it will require resources and time." Rosie started to adjust to her new surroundings over the course of the following few days, but she still recoiled at abrupt movements in her. Her eyes had a haunting expression, But she made progress when she let the caregivers feed her and her tail by hand. When her pups were playing with her, Lucas, who typically avoided the emotional aspects of the situation, gave a small wag. One afternoon, while sitting at Rosie's side, he was drawn to her peaceful strength, her bed with a bundle of goodies in his lap. "Hey girl," he said, offering a biscuit. After hesitating, Rosie slithered closer to remove it from his grasp. Lucas grinned. His face was illuminated with an unusual warmth. "Well done." Rosie Emma, who observed from the doorway. She stepped inside Lucas. Her heart swelled. "I'm warming up to you." Although his smile persisted, he shrugged, saying, "She's tougher than she looks." Emma rolled her eyes but couldn't stop grinning. "She's fortunate to have you." Despite the advancements, Rosie found it difficult to trust others. In addition to Emma and Lucas, Megan's health was still in jeopardy one evening as Emma got ready to leave for the day. Drew her aside, saying in a hesitant tone, "We need to talk about Rosie. Although she's responding well to treatment, the veterinarian believes her condition may be more serious than we initially believed." But Emma was experiencing panic. "What can we do to keep her anxious? Levels down and concentrate on her recuperation," Megan clarified. "But we also need to begin considering what comes next." Emma's chest constricted at the thought of all she's been through. "But she's stable, so we'll need to find her a foster home." Later that evening, Emma sat on her couch and browsed through photos, wanting to be sure she ended up somewhere safe. She decided to contact Rosie after seeing her and her puppies on her phone and having a lot of ideas about how to assist them. Social media community of animal lovers who were spreading Rosie's tale in the hopes of discovering. The response to her ideal home was tremendous, with responses pouring in from. People were inspired by Rosie's tenacity and wanted to contribute to her care. Started to pour in, along with proposals from possible fosters. Lucas communities who hardly ever utilized social media and was taken aback by the overwhelming support that appeared, much like Rosie's. Leaning over Emma's shoulder to read the remarks, he continued, "You're already a star." Emma grinned more than she had before. After everything she's been through, she deserves to know in a few days. In the weeks that followed, Rosie made further progress in understanding what love feels like. Rosie herself was having fun at the shelter because of her pups' antics, which were making them stronger and more lively. One evening while Emma sat there, she started to trust more, wagging her tail more often and letting go of part of her dread. She observed something noteworthy about Rosie, who had always been uncomfortable with human contact while they were in the recovery area. Pressed her head into Emma's palm in an attempt to get affection. Emma's eyes wept as she caressed the dog's gentle. "I assure you, Fur, you'll be all right," she whispered as Rosie's health. The once quiet pups were now full of energy as new problems emerged. Their antics included biting at each other with playful growls and investigating every inch of the recovery room. Smiles to the shelter employees, but there were logistical issues as well. Restricted, and the space that had served as a haven was getting too tiny for the expanding family that Emma and Lucas were working with. They worked together to transform one of the larger rooms into a makeshift play area in order to create a more appropriate setting. Despite their best efforts, replete with safe obstacles, toys, and soft carpets, managing the puppies' boundless energy turned out to be a full-time job. "Did they ever get any sleep?" Lucas commented while observing. Emma, who was clearly exhausted, giggled when one of the puppies unsteadily fell on its sibling. In the meantime, Rosie and her puppies were having more problems finding a foster home than anticipated. Despite the attention the social media campaign had received, the majority of interest was in adopting the puppies instead than fostering the whole family. Megan and Emma spent one afternoon going over applications. There are many offers. Rosie is a more difficult case for the pups, and many are wary due to her past. Emma's jaw stiffened, but she's not. "I know Megan stated that she deserves a chance because she's a survivor." Gently, but realistically, if we are unable to find a foster home in the near future, we may have. Emma felt sick to her stomach at the idea of separating them. She's already been through a lot. From her puppies may depress her as the shelter faced these difficulties, and Rosie's background started to come to light in surprising ways. One night, a man who claimed to know her showed up at the shelter with his unkempt hair. Lucas was instantly agitated by the man's appearance and protective attitude. "I saw the pictures online. and he gestured too. Emma came forward with a calm, yet forceful tone. His phone, that dog's mine. She has a scar on her left side, poor eye, and the man hesitated, his eyes darting about the room. Do you have any proof of ownership? Giving her the name, Rosie Lucas looked at Emma, his gut telling him that something wasn't right if. The man's face hardened as he questioned. It's none of your business. Just give me back. She's yours. Why didn't you report her missing? Rosie is currently in our care if you would like to claim her. My dog Emma refused to back down. She will require appropriate documents. The man swore and hurried away, but the encounter. Emma couldn't get over the encounter she had with the squad later that night. Discovered herself back at the shelter, sitting next to Rosie's bed, with her babies snuggled up against her. Emma's voice was a quiet murmur, and she reached out to rub Rosie's fur. Don't want to harm you once more, I swear. Megan called a local. When police looked into the man's claim, they found that he was connected to illegal dog-fighting organizations that caused Rosie scars. And Lucas's initial apprehension about people now made terrible sense. He tightened his. When he learned that she would not be coming near him, he clenched his fists. Emma reassured him that we would guard her as the shelter attempted to guarantee Rosie's safety. An unforeseen obstacle emerged. The youngest puppy in the litter started exhibiting symptoms of disease. The once active pup now lay listless. Emma and Lucas hurried the puppy to the veterinarian because it refused to eat or play. Concerned, the diagnosis was an illness that, although curable, needed. The team, who had grown quite devoted to the puppies, suffered a setback when they had to provide them with urgent care and constant news monitoring. Rosie roamed the room of the shelter as if sensing her pup's absence. Emma stayed with her and tried to comfort him, saying, "He's in good hands," while his eyes darted to the door each time it opened. The following few days were a blur of care and coordination as the veterinarian tried to reassure him that he would be all right. In order to maintain the health of Rosie and the rest of the litter, Emma and Lucas sterilized the puppy. Despite the pandemonium, the neighborhood modified feeding schedules and kept a tight eye on the puppies for any indications of disease. During her moments of light, Rosie started to act fiercely like a mother, keeping watch over her puppies with unshakable attention and trust. Grew between Emma and Lucas, and she began to look for their companionship, hesitantly waving her tail when they entered the room one evening as Rosie was grooming her fur and Emma was sitting with him while Lucas cleaned the play area. You're stronger. Rosie leaned into the contact, her eyes closing in satisfaction. More than anyone I know, she whispered quietly. A rare smile tugged at Lucas's lips as he looked across. Shek has gone a long way, and we all. Emma's voice was full of quiet resolve as she responded to the ailing puppy. When Rosie returned to the shelter a week later, everyone was relieved. Her response was instantaneous, and she gave a gentle bark. The reunion was a moment of pure ecstasy, with her tail wagging as the small pup was put back with the litter. A tribute to Rosie's unwavering spirit, Lucas remarked, "Welcome back, little guy." Emma knelt next to him. As the shelter celebrated modest victories, we did it with the crate's eyes full of tears. Fortunately, the community rallied around Rosie's tail, and donations rose. Several volunteers donated their time to assist with the family's care. The once difficult obstacles are now felt. The shelter was busier, but it was still manageable because of the overwhelming support and the team's unwavering dedication. Rosie's story had garnered more attention than ever before, and although the encouragement was encouraging, it also brought fresh difficulties. Emma and Lucas had to balance their daily responsibilities with handling media requests and organizing volunteers. The strain of their duties was beginning to show. One morning, Lucas showed up to discover Emma seated in the playroom, looking at Rosie and her puppies with a look he couldn't quite decipher. He questioned, leaning against the doorframe, "Were you okay?" Emma nodded slowly, but her voice was heavy. "And I've been wondering, Lucas, what happens when Rosie and her puppies aren't the center of attention?" "Major story anymore," Emma sighed, and Lucas scowled. "We always find it out. Just worry. Rosie needs a loving family and a permanent home. She deserves so much more than this temporary arrangement." "And comprehends her and her puppies?" Lucas inquired. Emma's eyes shifted to the amusing litter, which presents another difficulty. Although they're cute right now, they will eventually become pups. require love, care, and training. Not everyone is ready for that. As if on cue, a volunteer came in with a, "People are waiting in line," Emma stated with a smile. "We have received adoption applications for all the puppies." Emma looked at the applications for them and felt a little sad. She couldn't describe it, but the thought of it felt horrible to take Rosie away from her puppies since their link was too strong and special. Lucas took note of her. Emma paused before saying, "What's on your mind?" "I know though it's hardly realistic, I can't help but wonder what may have happened if they had remained together. Rosie has lost her puppies a lot." Considering what she had said, Lucas stroked the back of his neck, thinking, "It's a noble idea, Emma, but I know, Emma. Finding someone who can take in Rosie and all of her puppies is a difficult task." Acknowledged, but it's possible that we're not searching in the correct areas. What if someone else is aware of what they've been through, someone who can provide them with the life they deserve? The discussion was cut short when Megan called. Learned that the man who had previously claimed Rosie had a history of illicit activity, according to the authorities. She said he won't be returning because of the dogfighting, but it serves as a reminder of how Emma's gut twisted at the realization of how frightening her background was. "Thank you, Megan. Keep me informed." Emma went to Lucas after hanging up the phone, "And we can't let her leave. We must locate the ideal home via additional trauma." That afternoon, Emma and Lucas met to discuss the adoption. The procedure was discouraging because the majority of the applications were for individual puppies, and none of them stuck out as being appropriate for Rosie. And as the hours went by, their annoyance increased. "I think we're missing something," Emma mentioned while running a hand over her hair. "Someone must be able to take them all." Lucas reclined in his chair and gazed at the ceiling. "Perhaps we might consider unconventional ideas like a refuge or a..." Emma's eyes brightened as the family with plenty of room said, "A sanctuary could be ideal. Rosie and her puppies would stay together and have space to run." Emma spent the following days contacting rescue groups and sanctuaries. The majority were full, but one reply offered her hope. A sizable animal refuge a few hours distant indicated interest in adopting. The shelter had expertise treating animals from severe events, and Rosie and her pups' histories, and was open to meeting with Emma and Lucas. The shelter staff embraced the concept and worked tirelessly too. As Emma prepared Rosie and the puppies for their trip, she couldn't help but feel both anxious and excited about the refuge. Appeared to be the best course of action, but it was frightening to consider leaving Rosie and her puppies in the care of someone else. On the day of the visit, Rosie and her puppies were loaded into the shelter van by Emma and Lucas. The ride was peaceful. Rosie appeared to understand the importance of the journey while sitting quietly next to Emma, despite the decision's weighty atmosphere. When they arrived, the sanctuary workers welcomed them with open arms while the pups were sleeping in their kennel. Rosie paused at open fields, comfortable shelters, and serene ambience. As the staff drew closer, her defensive instincts initially kicked in, but as one of the sanctuary staff leaned down and Rosie astonished everyone by going forward and gingerly sniffing before extending a hand. The director of the sanctuary remarked, "She's amazing," before she began to wag her tail. Emma felt a knot grow in her throat as Rosie interacted with the staff. It would be a pleasure to have her and her puppies here. The director grinned and said, "You sure it's a big commitment? Rosie and her puppies will be safe here, and they'll receive the affection and attention they merit." Lucas touched Emma's shoulder, "And I believe this is the..." Emma nodded in the proper spot, fighting back tears as they got ready to part ways with her. Crouched next to Rosie and stroked her fur, saying, "We miss you, but this is your place. You're going to be very happy here." New beginning. Rosie's eyes were full of trust as she licked Emma's palm. Back at the shelter, Emma and Lucas thought back on the journey we took together and shared a moment that Emma will always remember. Replied, "We gave them another chance." Emma grinned, "No FA," adding that they gave us another chance every week. Passed after Emma and Lucas resumed their regular schedules at the refuge following Rosie and her pup's arrival. Shelter. But even though they knew they had taken the correct choice, they both found themselves reflecting on something different. Regarding Rosie frequently, Emma one morning got a surprise email from the head of the sanctuary with the subject line. Emma's heart was racing when she opened the email after reading about an amazing development with Rosie. It started with a, "Rosie was greeted warmly but got right to the point. She has been a remarkable asset to our sanctuary. The director wrote, but something noteworthy occurred last night when we saw her acting strangely. We found something startling as we followed Emma close to one of the far fields. Emma's eyes widened. Rosie was the stray dog the refuge staff discovered lurking in the underbrush, scared and hurt. To warn them that the injured dog, a little terrier mix, was howling frantically and would not leave until help arrived. Emma called Lucas right away after receiving medical care to share the news. It seems like Rosie has a sick feeling about. Lucas laughed as she replied, I'm always helping others. Her voice tinged with wonder. Been exceptional. I'm not shocked that she's already having an impact there. But the email from the sanctuary contained more information too. Identify the injured dog as more than just a stray. It has a small tattoo inside its ear, which is a common unlawful. The head of the sanctuary assumed that the dog had escaped from a nearby dog breeding farm. This revelation about trafficking made Emma shudder. Do you think Rosie saw something in that dog? She asked out loud if she felt they had a similar past. Lucas gave a contemplative nod, suggesting that dogs might have an extraordinary capacity for empathy, particularly for traumatized individuals like Rosie. The email concluded. It appears like the sanctuary director invited Emma and Lucas to come and talk further about the problem. Emma stated, determination shines in her eyes, and Rosie's journey isn't over yet. Emma and Lucas returned to the sanctuary the following day when the director welcomed them, guided them to a peaceful spot where Rosie was sleeping with her puppies. Emma had a wave of emotions upon seeing Rosie again. Her eyes were bright and full of recognition, and the golden retriever greeted her with a wagging tail. She has been an incredible DOR. But this new situation has us all on edge, and we need to act quickly if there is an illegal operation nearby, the director stated. Lucas and Emma listened as the director explained the results, which showed that the terrier's tattoo was connected to a recognized network of breeders who took use of dogs for financial gain. Although the sanctuary had warned local authorities about, Emma's protective instincts kicked in, and she asked the staff what they could do to ensure the protection of their own animals. The director paused, saying that while we're stepping up security and collaborating with law authorities, Rosie might possess the secret to learning more about this operation. She has been vigilant and attentive in the vicinity of specific sanctuary regions. Lucas looked at Rosie, who was observing them closely, as though sensing something. You believe she would be able to guide us to. The director acknowledged that her intuition had already shown itself to be exceptional that night. Emma and Rosie accompanied the sanctuary personnel on their patrol of the grounds, and Lucas joined them. Her movements were deliberate, and Rosie's ears pricked as she started to bark softly as they got closer to the distant field where the terrier had been discovered. The troop walked gingerly into the underbrush, with her tail rigidly following her lead. The night was calm except for Rosie halted abruptly, her body taut, and she smelled the air when she heard the rustle of leaves and the occasional owl hoot, then ran ahead, halting next to an ancient, deserted shed when the party got closer to the. With caution, they put out their flashlights, piercing the inside darkness. Abandoned food containers, a frayed leash, and the signs of recent activity. Even though there were no animals present, the shed had obviously been utilized as a holding area because of a slight dog urine odor. This is unquestionably related, the director stated in her voice. Grim, we must report this right away because Rosie kept searching the area Emma watched her in while the team photographed the scene. She's amazing, she said to Lucas, with a mixture of awe and uneasiness. This is more serious than we thought, and the discovery made things more urgent. The director of the refuge promised Emma and Lucas that the investigation would be handled by the authorities, but Emma was unable to. As they made their way back to the shelter that evening, Emma thought about how difficult it was to shake the notion that Rosie's journey was far from over. Do you believe Rosie was destined to find that dog, given everything that has transpired? She questioned Lucas, who agreed. If anyone can shed light on what's going on in the world, Rosie isn't simply getting by. She's changing things. Emma ended up at the shelter the morning following the shed discovery, peering out the window with her mind racing. You've been quiet, Rosie. Lucas entered the sanctuary with a coffee mug and sat on the desk next to her, stated, I just keep thinking of Rosie while I'm sitting across from her Emma's side. It's like, Lucas agreed, saying that she is guiding us on this route for a reason and that it is now about discovering something a lot more significant. But what to do next? Emma's phone buzzed, interrupting their chat, and it was a message from authorities have begun looking into the surroundings, according to the sanctuary director. Their hunt has been greatly aided by Rosie's behavior. The message featured a picture of Rosie sniffing close to it. Emma is continuing working in an abandoned field with her pups calmly sitting nearby. Whispered to Lucas, I think we should go back, there's more to uncover. They packed a few that afternoon. Supplies. The director welcomed them back to the refuge and informed them that the authorities had discovered another area associated with the illicit activity, and Rosie had been instrumental in guiding them there. But there was a lot of tension because the network was bigger and better organized than Emma and Lucas had first believed. Rosie appeared more focused in her moves this time. According to the personnel for another patrol, she guided them to the edge of the sanctuary, where an old trail started, while carefully sniffing the air and the ground. The group paused as they wound their way into the woods. The track was dark and overgrown, but Rosie's perseverance left no. Emma stated in a stern voice that there was room for doubt. Let's trust her. Lucas gave her a flashlight, and they trailed behind Rosie into the woods, which were eerily quiet save for the rustling of. Rosie purposefully moved with her nose near to the ground, navigating the leaves beneath her feet. She stopped suddenly after approximately 20 minutes, her ears perking up a little. Emma's heart pounded when she heard Lucas moan through the trees. Did you hear that? Nodding, the group tightened their hold on the beam and followed the sound, eventually stumbling as it came from over there. Another abandoned shed, more run-down than the last one, was situated in a tiny clearing tucked away amid the shrubs. Rosie started to bark, circled the building, and poured at the door. Inside, they discovered 3 dogs who were scared and thin. Emma's heart ached at seeing them with their tails tucked between their legs. We must get them out of here, she said. Shivering, the team moved swiftly to release the dogs, gently luring them out with food and kind words. One of the, as though sensing Rosie was a tough dog, a tenacious-looking terrier clung to her. Protect her. The rescued canines were inspected and given treatment at the refuge. Everyone could see that Emma and Lucas stayed to support their relationship with Rosie, which was strengthening every hour. That Rosie had a special talent for seeing danger and directing people to safety over. Rosie's instincts are amazing, but I believe there's more to it, the sanctuary director said during dinner. Emma scowled. You mean that before she ended up under that bridge, she might have been a part of a similar operation? The director told her that she could have escaped from one of these locations. Her actions imply that she has gone through a painful event and is now motivated to prevent others from going through it. Emma's will was strengthened by fate, and if that's the case, she's not simply surviving. She's a hero, and we must assist her in any way we can. And the following day, Rosie led them to yet another place, this time a remote hut deep in. They discovered more proof of the trafficking network's chains, containers, and abandoned paperwork in the woods. As the operation took shape and the authorities were called in, Emma couldn't help but feel a mixture of rage and indignation about the abuse these pets had to experience, but also hope due to Rosie's. With her bravery and tenacity, she was emerging as a resilient role model who inspired everyone in her vicinity. As the days passed, Rosie's efforts started to garner attention outside and beyond the sanctuary, and local news outlets began to cover the tale, referring to her as the Bridge Guardian. Financial contributions flooded in to help the sanctuary's operations, and volunteers offered their assistance everywhere. And Emma and Lucas discovered Elle in the heart of a burgeoning movement that had begun as the straightforward rescue mission beneath a bridge was suddenly shedding light on a sinister and brutal industry. And at its core was. One evening while Emma and Lucas were sitting by the fire pit in the sanctuary, Rosie, the golden retriever, refused to give up. Considering the whirlwind of events, Rosie came up to them with her puppies in tow. With grateful eyes, she nuzzled Emma's hand behind her. She knew Lucas. Emma smiled and shed a tear as she replied softly, I know we're all in this together. The sanctuary was bustling with activity while the crew worked on her eyes. And we won't stop until all dogs like her are safe. working nonstop to tend to the rescued canines and reconstruct the evidence they had found. Rosie was her protective impulses were at the heart of it all. Yet when additional sites were found and demolished, the stakes increased. The sanctuary director called Emma one morning, and her tone was grave. "Emma, Emma's heart fell when she discovered that the last place we found wasn't only an outpost, but rather a vital hub. What that implies is that the individuals behind this are running a far bigger operation than we initially believed, are not going to allow us to shut them down without a struggle," Emma thought as she drove to the. Instead, she discovered Lucas and the director in the office going over the recovered documents and maps. Rosie sat near the door, her ears perked up, sensing the latest raid. Lucas clarified that the authorities are under a lot of strain and have requested further time to plan their next course of action. However, we must remain alert in the interim because we are unsure of these individuals' reactions. The director nodded. Hazardous, and since we've already interfered with their business, there's a considerable probability they'll attempt to strike back once the sun sets. Emma was so uneasy that night that she made the decision to spend the night at the sanctuary with a few. Rosie appeared restless to the other volunteers watching her, pacing close to the shelter's entrance and occasionally. Around midnight, Rosie's growls became sharp, urgent as she snarled at the shadows. Emma woke up with a start, grabbed a flashlight, and hurried outdoors while Lucas was. Emma, who was kneeling next to Rosie, questioned, "What is it, girl?" as his flashlight was already shining through the darkness. Emma and Lucas followed the golden retriever as it ran toward the boundary gate, barking frantically, their hearts racing. A dark figure darted into the woods as they arrived at the fence, but not before they noticed movement in the bushes. Rosie barked louder when something was thrown over the fence, and Emma's body tensed. Slowly approached, uncovering a bundle wrapped in a filthy blanket with her flashlight. She looked at. Before Lucas bent down to open it, he discovered a tiny dog that was barely alive. Its fur was matted, and Emma's body shook from the cold, and her heart ached at what she saw. "We need to get it inside," she whispered, her voice shaking. Emma and Rosie watched over whoever had been there while Lucas picked up the puppy and transported it to the shelter. Gone, but it was evident that this was a signal that the traffickers were conveying a message that the team's focus was no longer just on the dogs, and they promptly warmed up and hydrated indoors. After hours of touching Ando, the puppy showed signs of improvement in the morning, and Rosie remained by its side. Emma felt a wave of resolution sweep over her as she observed Rosie tending to the puppy, and her presence was calming. "If anything, this shows how desperate they are to continue their operation. We have to stop," she said to Lucas. Lucas nodded, "But we must exercise caution because we're not only dealing with brutality." The sanctuary director joined the convicts, and her attitude was grim as she addressed the authorities. "Are preparing a raid on what they consider to be the last location, and they have requested our assistance in organizing it using the information we've." Rosie informed me that the plan was dangerous because the last site was tucked away among abandoned buildings deep in the bush. It was a lot to ask for, but officials required Rosie's assistance in locating the precise site where the dogs were being held. But as the team got ready for the procedure that night, Emma sat with Rosie and felt she was capable. She muttered, "You've done so much already, girl," as she stroked her golden fur. "Yet we need you one more time." Rosie gave her a glance that said, "I'm ready for the next morning," with those perceptive, trusting eyes. The air was heavy with expectancy as the squad headed into the woodland, with each step leading to the suspected site felt like. Rosie led the way with her nose to the ground as she took a step into the unknown, deliberate, and when they arrived at the site's edge, they noticed an ancient warehouse encircled by tall fencing. The authorities were anxious as Rosie growled, and her body echoed faintly from inside. Cautiously entered the scene by opening the gate with bolt cutters. Tragically, scores of canines crowded into cages with terrified eyes. Rosie immediately acted, barking and guiding the rescuers to the dogs who most urgently needed care. But as the team toiled, and as they returned, the distant sound of motors revving chilled the air. Lucas stated, his voice urgent. Before the traffickers arrived, Emma, the rescue team, worked more quickly to free as many dogs as possible. Remained beside Rosie, her pulse racing as the noise of the engines increased, and then the cars came into view. A bunch of men leaped out, shouting, and moving toward the warehouse as spotlights cut through the foliage. With a concerted effort, officials were prepared and stopped the traffickers, apprehending them before they could arrive at the location. The operation was successful, although there was still tension when the final dogs were loaded into. As the convoy returned, Emma sat next to Rosie and held her hand as the transport vehicles headed for the sanctuary. Rosie nuzzled her as she murmured, "You did it," while we were lying on the dog's head. She waved her tail softly. The fight was not yet done, but for the first time it felt as though they were winning. But the silence and the weight of what had happened that night weighed heavily on the trip back to the sanctuary. The rescued dogs were crowded in their kennels, their eyes displaying a mixture of dread and hope, hovering over everyone. Rosie rested at Emma's feet, her tail moving slightly, but her golden fur streaked with grime. Although she had fulfilled her role, Emma was aware that the crew at the sanctuary still had to make some difficult choices. Work tirelessly to care for the recently rescued canines, giving them food and water, a thorough examination, and cleaning. Were undernourished. Some had scars, and others had ribs that were evident through matted fur. It silently described the pain she endured as she went from kennel to kennel, her heart aching with each weak wag. The director of the sanctuary remarked, "Tail, we've never taken in this many dogs at once," in a voice full of worry. "Capacity, we must swiftly locate foster families or homes or risk depleting our resources," Emma said. As the seriousness of the situation becomes more apparent, we must not disappoint these dogs, having endured too much. As the dawn rose, Emma sat down with the director and Lucas to talk about their next moves. Despite the fact that the traffickers had been apprehended, there was no assurance that their extensive network would be brought to. Ultimately, they needed to choose how to use the material they had acquired to maximize the impact before we could release the video. Presenting images to the media, Lucas said that by letting everyone see what's actually going on, money can be raised, and backed the director's hesitancy, which poses a risk if the incorrect individuals view it. They might strike back. We've already seen how far they'll go. Emma looked at Rosie, who was sleeping close by. We must bring attention to this, because the golden retriever's presence had been a beacon of hope during the trauma. Stated emphatically that these dogs deserve justice, and that we could prevent this from happening again if we could persuade people to care. Team made the decision to proceed with a public awareness campaign that would use the video to highlight the brutality of the trafficking ring, but they were aware that they needed to move swiftly and cautiously, so they spent the following few days gathering the proof. Emma spent hours going over the material to build a story that would appeal to viewers and motivate them to take action. The pictures of misery made my stomach turn, but in the shadows, I could see glimpses of hope dogs wagging there. As the volunteers were released, Rosie led the way with her gentle bravery in reassuring the terrified animals. News sources picked up the story when the campaign first started, and social media was inundated with donations flooded in after seeing pictures and videos of the rescued pups, and offers to fostering and adopting these dogs helped the shelter become a symbol of resiliency, a place where their worst moments occurred, were compassionately rewritten, and Rosie in particular won hearts all around her. Her tale of being discovered beneath a bridge and saving countless others became a call to action for her. Bravery and dedication inspired the campaign participants, and she became the movement spokesperson. But the attention presented its own difficulties as the refuge was overrun by tourists, some of whom were well-intentioned and others who were just inquisitive. The team had to step up security and put in a lot of effort to control the influx of supplies and animals. Emma was pulled to Rosie's kennel as she strolled around the sanctuary that evening. The golden retriever was curled up on her bed. She watched Emma with silent comprehension as she crouched down. "You've accomplished so much, Rosie," she remarked, putting a hand through her fur next to her. Since there's still a lot to do, Rosie licked Emma's fingers and thumped her tail more gently than anyone could have requested, softly touching the earth. It seemed as though she realized that their journey was far from ended. Emma and the gang woke up the following morning, received a surprise visit after learning about it from a national animal protection advocate. Their efforts and desire to collaborate with the sanctuary The group provided financial resources and a platform to extend their work outside of the neighborhood. "This is a fantastic chance," the director stated following the. Emma agreed that it would be worthwhile if we could meet and make a significant difference, but it will require all of our might. With a new collaboration in place, it's worth it to spare even one more dog from going through what these ones have. As the refuge expanded, more kennels were constructed, volunteers joined the group, and the dogs were given. Rosie's presence was consoling, and the care and attention they need to heal her remained crucial. And fortitude for all. But as the refuge grew, the difficulties also increased. Emma was overburdened with the duties of her work and her desire to assist the pet. She frequently stayed up late, her heart heavy from the stories they told her. One night, as she was walking through, Emma discovered Rosie standing at the border of the sanctuary, her body tight and her ears perked up. As she continued to look, she noticed a car stopped on the street with its headlights off and a person standing next to it, observing the sanctuary. Emma's heart raced, wondering if there was someone involved in the trafficking network. She grabbed her phone and prepared to call for assistance, but before she could react, the car drove away. The experience left her shaken, but it also made her resolve She understood they needed to remain cautious since Sanctuary's mission was far from done. Emma sat down inside and stroked Rosie. As the golden retriever nestled against her side, she whispered, "No matter what it takes, we're not giving up." Rosie gazed up in her eyes, which were full of faith and resolve. Together, they would overcome whatever obstacles that were ahead. In the days that followed the eerie encounter, Emma and her sanctuary experienced a mixture of stress and resolve. The group increased security by setting up cameras and working with local authorities to maintain the staff's and the animals' safety in spite of the sanctuaries. Rosie was Emma's constant companion, her presence a source of unrelenting focus while the task continued. Emma frequently found herself captivated to Rosie's quiet strength in the face of mounting difficulties, admiring how a dog, who, one morning, became such a symbol of hope and resiliency after having been abandoned beneath a bridge as Emma. As she was ready to start her rounds, she saw Rosie standing close to the gate, her body tense and her golden ears perked up. Emma had hardly heard the deep growl that the retriever made after. Emma noticed a man loitering just outside the sanctuary's grounds, staring at the lines of kennels. Emma's heart pounded as she walked to the gate, attempting to speak calmly. "Can I help you?" she exclaimed. Emma watched as the man appeared shocked, his eyes darting to Rosie before he murmured something and turned to go. He left her feeling increasingly uneasy. Was he involved in the trafficking ring? He was just another interested bystander attracted by the sanctuary's recent notoriety, and the episode reaffirmed the necessity for vigilance. Emma called a team meeting and emphasized the value of being vigilant and reporting any uncommon. "We've gone too far to allow anything to compromise these dogs' safety," she stated firmly, and the team concurred. Their resolve was similar to Emma's. They were aware that the refuge had become a target due to their efforts, but they were determined to safeguarding the creatures that had already suffered as much that night as the sun. Emma paused to consider the sanctuary's path as she strolled among the kennels and sank beneath the horizon. When she arrived at Rosie's kennel, she checked on each dog and gave them a pat or a reassuring remark. Emma crouched down, her tail wagging softly as the retriever waited for her. Beside her, she felt a wave of appreciation for the dog that had become her loyal companion. "Rosie, you've been through so much, but you never gave up, and neither will we," she whispered later that evening. An unexpected power outage rushed over the sanctuary, leaving everything in complete darkness. Emma grabbed a flashlight and made. As she stepped outdoors, her heart began to race as she made sure the generator wasn't broken and had been purposefully tampered with. The knowledge that someone had targeted the refuge, perhaps with the hopes of cause mayhem while hiding in the shadows. Emma contacted Lucas, who showed up in a matter of minutes, his face grim as he looked about the situation. "We must protect the property," he added, adding that the person who did this could still be. Rosie started barking hysterically, her piercing screams cutting close by as Lucas and Emma attempted to restore power. Emma followed the sound through the quiet, her flashlight moving across the kennels until it came to rest on a dark When the figure near the fence realized they had been seen, they immediately fled into the woods. Beyond the land, Lucas granted chase, but the intruder disappeared too quickly. When he came back into the darkness, his face was a mixture of frustration and decided that they were undoubtedly doing nothing constructive. He stated that we must report this. Emma met with local officials the following morning to talk about the incident, and she expressed her worries that due of its increased exposure, the sanctuary may have become a target for individuals. Officers linked to the trafficking ring encouraged Emma to stay and pledged to step up patrols in the region. Despite the stress, the staff remained vigilant and increased their efforts to take care of the dog's tenacity, driven by the awareness that each minor triumph pushed them one step closer to their objective. Rosie's. After the incident, the golden retriever's attachment with Emma only grew stronger, as if he could sense Emma's discomfort remaining. Close at her side and providing silent solace, Emma frequently found herself in awe of Rosie's fortitude. Courage from the dog's steadfast devotion. One afternoon, when Emma sat in the Rosie pushed her hand with her nose as Emma looked up to see the adoption applications being reviewed in the sanctuary's office. A golden retriever with her leash and her mouth and eyes that sparkle with silent resolve makes you want to take a walk. Rosie wagged her tail as Emma asked, grinning slightly, and Emma couldn't help but laugh. "All right, girl, let's go." Rosie trotted ahead of Emma as they walked to a peaceful route behind the sanctuary, where she frequently went to decompress. For a brief moment, the anxiety of the previous weeks appeared to vanish as the golden fur gleamed in the sunlight, giving way to a sense of peace. Rosie abruptly halted when they arrived in a tiny area. Emma's breath caught as she knelt to pick up something glinting in the grass after following her eyes. Then she recognized it, a tiny engraved tag bearing the name Rosie and A. Emma gazed at the phone number tag, wondering where it had come from. She looked at Rosie, who was observing her closely, her tail wiggling a little. "How did it get here?" Emma whispered, even though she was aware of the solution. Rosie had been discovered without a collar, and her past was mysterious, but this tag was. The revelation introduced a new level of complexity by providing evidence that someone had previously taken care of her and may still be looking for her. As they returned to the sanctuary, Emma realized she couldn't resist the mystery in Rosie's story. As Rosie got ready for the next stage of their journey, she was determined to learn the truth about her history. A small engraved tag led to a flurry of inquiries about who had previously looked after Rosie and why the tag was discovered so near. Emma couldn't get rid of the notion that someone or something was directing the sanctuary now after all this time. Occurrences involving this tenacious golden retriever who is committed to finding solutions. When Emma got back to her office, she contacted the number on the tag. The line rang multiple times before the voice said, "Hello," with hesitation and a hint of melancholy. "Hello, Emma. My name is Emma, and I own a dog sanctuary outside of town." There was a long pause before the speaker said, "I think I might have found your dog, Rosie." Broke with emotion, "Rosie, are you still alive?" Emma answered in a voice. Softening, the man identified himself as Walter, an old widower who is here with us and is safe and healthy. Had lost Rosie months prior. Walter described how, during a violent thunderstorm, Rosie had become alarmed when she heard. Despite his best efforts to locate her, he had assumed the worst after weeks of thunder rushing from his backyard. "Since my wife died away, she has been at my side as I hunt." Walter acknowledged his voice. "Emma," I trembled because losing her was like losing a piece of my heart again. As she listened, she felt a knot in her throat. "Rosie has been amazing," she whispered softly. "She's brought so much." Walter's response was, "I'd be honored to reunite you if you're ready, but comfort to everyone at the sanctuary." "Yes, right away. Tell me the time and location. I'll be there as planned." Emma picked up the phone, her heart racing, for Walter to come to the sanctuary the next afternoon. She gazed down at Rosie, who was happily lying at her feet, apparently oblivious to the life-altering event, with eagerness. Moment that awaited her the following day. The sanctuary was alive with subdued enthusiasm. Emma made sure Rosie was prepped and groomed as the crew got ready for Walter's arrival, her golden coat gleaming in the. When it was time, Emma led Rosie to the main gate in the afternoon, where a small sedan came into the driveway, and Walter got out slowly, his warn. He looked over the grounds with a mixture of hope and fear, and when his gaze fell on Rosie, his face fell apart. He muttered to Rosie, "It's really you," with tears flowing down his cheeks. The golden retriever paused for a second before Emma unclipped her leash and nudged her forward. With a happy yelp, he ran toward Walter, who fell on his knees and spread his arms wide as Rosie sprang into his. Man and dog, clinging to each other during the reunion, was nothing short of miraculous. Emma and the team watched with tears in their eyes as if no time had gone, the scene serving as a moving reminder of. This moment was the result of all the challenges and victories they had encountered, which is why they did what they did for Emma. Walter gazed up at Emma while stroking Rosie's fur, his eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you," he said in a grateful tone. Emma grinned heartily. "You've given me back a part of my soul. Rosie gave her so much during her time here, so it's only fitting that she eventually goes back to the one who loves her the most." Rosie and Walter spent the evening at the sanctuary, reminiscing about their time spent there. Walter was astounded by Rosie expressed his awe at the dog's ability for love and the link he had developed with Emma and the other animals. Loyalty as the sanctuary was bathed in a lovely golden glow as the sun sank. Emma considered the path that had led them to this point. Rosie's tale was one of tenacity, optimism, and the irreversible connection between people and animals. And although Emma would mourn her golden friend terribly, she was aware that Rosie deserved this happy ending before departing. So Walter came up to Emma with a proposal. He mentioned that Rosie found a home here when I was unable to be there for her, and I would want to support the sanctuary. Emma was surprised, but profoundly moved by Walter's offer of assistance, since she wants to ensure that other animals have the same opportunity. Would be extremely beneficial to the sanctuary's goal, enabling them to increase their rescue and rehabilitation operations. Emma's voice said, "Animals in need, you have no idea what this means to us." Walter smiled and said, "I'm so grateful that it's the least I can do." Rosie would prefer it this way. For Walter and Rosie, the reunion signaled the start of a new chapter in their lives and an opportunity to reconstruct For Emma and the sanctuary, the life they had lost served as a reminder of the transformational potential of kindness and tenacity as Emma watched Walter's car go away while Rosie was contentedly wagging her tail in the back seat. Her heart was heavy at the entrance because the sanctuary had lost a beloved inhabitant, but they had acquired something much more significant. A renewed feeling of direction and the understanding that their labor was genuinely important. Emma hovered by the sanctuary gate with her hands as the vehicle transporting Walter and Rosie vanished into the horizon. The golden retriever's happy reunion with her owner, sitting on the wooden frame, had permanently altered her heart, demonstrating the sanctuary's purpose of reviving hope one life at a time. The place felt more peaceful without. Over the last few months, Rosie had established herself as a constant source of warmth and devotion in their lives, but Emma deeply understood that Rosie's absence was a fulfillment of the sanctuary's mission to provide animals with the love and safety they were due, whether it was through reunion, after adoption, or a lifetime. Later that night, as the sun began to set behind the hills, Emma collected the sanctuary employees were seated on the terrace in the common area, surrounded by some of the resident animals that had gotten interested in the gathering and wanted to express my gratitude to everyone. Emma started speaking with the burden of thankfulness. Rosie's story was about us as much as her and Walter. The crew nodded their heads in agreement with the work we do, the lives we touch, and the difference we make every single day, demonstrating a common sense of pride and achievement that each participant had contributed to Rosie's journey since her rescue. Under the bridge to the love and care she had received at the sanctuary, Walter remained faithful to his. In addition to lending the refuge financial support, Word Turn became an unexpected yet crucial ally. However, he also started volunteering because he was eager to return Walter's wisdom to the organization that had taken care of Rosie while he was away. And kind disposition soon won over both the crew and the animals, making him a cherished part of their extended. Rosie was also remembered by her family. Walter regularly took her back to the sanctuary for visits, where she greeted with a beaming joy Emma and the staff seemed to realize that this place had been her lifeline and wished to express her appreciation in her own way. With Walter's help, the refuge flourished. They introduced unique places for animals with particular requirements and enlarged their facilities. Public education campaigns about responsible pet ownership in the neighborhood and the value of having empathy for animals. One such program taught kids about empathy, and Emma observed a group of local students touring the sanctuary one afternoon, their wide-eyed curiosity in sharp contrast to the difficult circumstances that many of the animals had to deal with. Emma pondered how small, meaningful relationships are where change starts, and Rosie's story had an influence that went well beyond the sanctuary's boundaries. Inspiring local and online groups had heard about her miraculous journey and touching reunion. Numerous individuals flocked in to participate in animal rescue initiatives, inspired by the compassion and hope shown in Rosie's tale. More volunteers volunteered one evening as Emma. In her office, she looked over the sanctuary's progress reports and found a handwritten message nestled among the documents. It said, "I can never thank you enough for what you did for Rosie and me." And it was from Walter to Emma. It made me think about, "You've given me cause to believe in second chances and the goodwill that still remains in the world, not just for creatures, but for the sake of others. I'm honored to support you in this mission. Thank you." Emma sat back in her. Nevertheless, the note she was holding in her hands was about the innumerable lives that were at stake, not just Rosie or Walter, not yet impacted by their efforts. The refuge was a place where hope existed in addition to being a haven for animals. Restored, relationships were formed, months stretched into years, and the refuge thrived as a compassionate lighthouse. Emma frequently thought about Rosie's legacy and how one wounded golden escape had set off a series of events that changed people's lives, and Walter and Rosie paid a visit on the anniversary of Rosie's rescue. Among fans, employees, and volunteers, they held a special celebration at the sanctuary and unveiled a plaque close to Rosie, a symbol of tenacity, was honored at the sanctuary's entrance. The crowd exploded in applause, and Emma sensed the power of love and second chances. She felt a rush of emotion as she looked at Walter, who was standing with Rosie proudly by his side. Their bond was as strong as, sturdy as ever. Emma escorted Walter and Rosie to their car as the evening came to an end and attendees started to depart. The chilly evening air was accompanied by hues of pink and orange that decorated the sky. Walter smiled as he turned to face Emma and said, "You know, Rosie isn't just my dog anymore. She's part of something much more." Emma laughed quietly. "It's bigger than anything you built, because she's a part of all of us, Walter. And she will always be Rosie," who knelt down to scratch behind her and waved her tail as though she agreed with the message. Before they left, she murmured to Rosie, "Take care of your ears one last time. Done more than you can ever imagine." And Emma was standing at the gate just as she had been on the day of their reunion when the automobile drove off. But this time, instead of feeling sad or yearning, she felt a deep sense of purpose and a reminder that even the tiniest deeds of compassion have the power to cause change in the world. Emma assisted the surviving staff members at the sanctuary in their last rounds of caring for the creatures that considered this site home. As she passed through the stars, which were a silent testament to the stories that had not yet been written, Emma felt that the sanctuary's well-known paths were just the beginning. What did you think of? If you think that kindness and second chances are powerful, please share your thoughts in the comment section below. Please hit the notification bell, like, and subscribe for more motivational stories like this one. Thank you, observing, and we'll see you in the following tale.